January 27th, 1943. 26,000 feet above Wilhelmshaven, Germany. The cold is immediate and brutal, the kind that seeps through layers of wool and leather and settles deep in the bones. Inside the glass nose of a B-17 flying fortress, Lieutenant James Jim Callahan hunches over a metal and glass contraption bolted to the floor. His oxygen mask fogs slightly as he exhales. Frost feathers the edges of the plexiglass around him. Below, through breaks in the cloud, the German coastline sides past. This is Jim Callahan's war, not the roar of machine guns or the violent jolt of flak ripping through aluminum skin. Those come later. For now, everything depends on stillness, on calculation, on trust in a device that promises something no bomber crew in history has ever truly had. Accuracy. The intercom crackles. "Bombardier, you're up." Callahan doesn't answer right away. His gloved hands rest lightly on the controls of the Norden bombsight, fingers steady despite the aircraft shuddering in thin air. He has practiced this moment hundreds of times, over Kansas, over Texas, over mock targets painted onto desert floors. Never like this. The Norden is alive beneath his touch. Gyros hum softly. Crosshairs float and stabilize as the aircraft banks, then levels out. Callahan peers through the eyepiece, his world narrowing to dials, numbers, and the faint outline of a shipyard far below. Somewhere behind him, men are dying. Somewhere below him, men are waiting. Callahan hears his instructor's voice in his head, calm and relentless. Treat it like an equation. The bomb doesn't know it's at war. He adjusts airspeed, inputs altitude, compensates for wind drift. The bombsight calculates faster than he can think, correcting for factors no human mind could track simultaneously. This is the promise they were sold. One bomb, one target. Steady, steady. Flak begins to burst closer now. The aircraft jolts, and Callahan's stomach lurches, but the Norden holds. The crosshairs drift, then settle again. Below, anti-aircraft guns flash uselessly, tiny and furious. Bombs away. The aircraft leaps as its load drops. Callahan watches the bombs fall, shrinking into nothingness, his breath held until the release mechanism clicks empty. October 14th, 1943, over Schweinfurt, Germany. The sky is full of aircraft and empty of hope. Lieutenant Jim Callahan knows this before anyone says it. He can feel it in the way the formation stretches and contracts under pressure, in the way engines strain as pilots fight to hold altitude while evasive maneuvers ripple through the bomber stream. This is not the calm, textbook approach the Norden was built for. This is survival. Flak bursts bloom like black flowers, closer than they should be. A fortress 2 ships over shudders, then begins to fall out of formation, one wing trailing smoke. German fighters slice through the gaps, cannon fire stitching across aluminum skin. The intercom is chaos now. "Fighters! 12 o'clock high! Number 3's hit! Hold it! Hold it steady! Hold it steady!" Callahan presses his face into the eyepiece, knuckles white as he tries to keep the crosshairs from skittering across the target. The Norden is doing its part, gyros spinning, calculations updating. But the airplane will not stop moving. It cannot. If it flies straight and level for too long, it dies. This is the contradiction at the heart of American daylight bombing doctrine, and Schweinfurt exposes it brutally. The target, ball-bearing factories essential to German industry, demands precision. But precision demands predictability. And predictability, in the skies over Germany, is lethal. When the bombs finally fall, they do so through smoke, flak bursts, and fear. Callahan watches them disappear, knowing even before the photographs come back that this is not the decisive blow planners had hoped for. The losses are catastrophic. Dozens of bombers gone, hundreds of men missing or dead. And yet, when the analysis begins, something unsettling emerges. The bombs that do hit close, closer than anyone expected under these conditions. The Norden has not failed. The system around it has. Back in England, commanders argue late into the night. Some want to abandon daylight bombing altogether. Others insist that precision is still possible, if crews can be protected long enough to use it. The truth is uncomfortable but undeniable. Accuracy does not improve simply because the bombsight exists. It improves because crews live long enough to learn. Bombardiers who survive 10 missions are better than those on their first. Crews who have flown together develop instincts no training manual can teach. Pilots learn exactly how long they can hold a straight course before drawing fatal attention. Bombardiers learn how much vibration they can tolerate and still trust the crosshairs. Experience matters, and experience requires survival. This is where the Norden's legend begins to shift. It was never a miracle weapon. It was a force multiplier. For crews who could use it under the right conditions, the Army Air Forces begin to understand this slowly, painfully in blood. At the same time, another truth becomes impossible to ignore. Even the most experienced bombardier cannot aim through solid cloud. Europe's weather does not care about doctrine. Overcast days stack up. Targets vanish beneath clouds. Entire missions are scrubbed or diverted. The British, watching from the sidelines, feel a grim sense of vindication. They had learned long ago that visibility is a luxury war rarely grants. American commanders face a choice: abandon precision or find a way to see without sight. December 1943, RAF Bordsey, England. In a low building cluttered with cables and oscilloscopes, engineers hunch over glowing screens as green blips flicker to life. This is not Norden's world of optics and gyros. This is radar. The British have been using it for night bombing for years. Crude, imprecise, but reliable in weather that blinds the human eye. American engineers arrive skeptical, protective of their daylight doctrine. They leave convinced. Radar bombing will never be as accurate as a clear-day Norden drop, but it will hit something every time, and sometimes something is enough. The system the Americans develop, H2X, nicknamed Mickey by crews, does not replace the Norden. It complements it. When escort fighters are present, when skies are clear, the bombsight still reigns supreme. When clouds close in, radar takes over. The doctrine adapts, not by abandoning belief, but by broadening it. Jim Callahan flies again in early 1944. This time, something is different. As the formation assembles, silver shapes slide into position on the wings. P-51 Mustangs, sleek and unfamiliar. They do not peel away at the German border like the older escorts did. They stay, all the way in. For the first time, the bombers are not alone over the target. German fighters attack, but they are harried, disrupted, forced to fight defensively. Flak still bursts, but the aircraft can hold formation longer, steadier. Callahan feels it immediately. The Norden steadies faster. The crosshairs stop dancing. This is what Carl Norden had imagined. Not just a perfect device, but a perfect environment for it to work. The bombs fall. This time, the photographs tell a different story. Patterns tighten. Miss distances shrink. The circular error probable drops not because the bombsight has changed, but because everything around it has. Protection, experience, adaptation, accuracy, the Americans realize, is cumulative. It is built mission by mission, and for the first time, the promise of precision no longer feels like a gamble. It feels like a process. March 6, 1944, over Berlin. The city is invisible. Lieutenant Jim Callahan knows exactly where Berlin should be. His map, his briefing notes, and his instincts all agree. But when he presses his face to the glass, there is nothing but cloud. A solid, endless white ceiling stretches below the bomber like an ocean turned upside down. No landmarks, no rivers, no aiming point. 2 years earlier, this mission would have been scrubbed. Today it proceeds. "Radar bomb run," the lead ship announces. Callahan exhales slowly and shifts his attention away from the Norden's optical eyepiece. Instead, he watches a faint, shimmering display fed from the H-2X radar unit mounted beneath the aircraft. The image is crude, ghostly outlines and smears of light. But it is something. A city leaves a signature. Rivers curve like scars. Rail yards bloom as bright knots. Industrial districts appear denser, heavier on the screen. Berlin announces itself not by sight, but by mass. Callahan listens as the radar operator calls corrections, the pilot adjusting course by degrees instead of landmarks. The aircraft flies straight and level again. Not because the sky is safe, but because escort fighters are holding the Luftwaffe at bay far above the clouds. This is bombing by instrument, bombing by trust. When the bombs release, there is no visible confirmation, only the slight upward leap of the aircraft and the quiet knowledge that gravity is now doing its work. Somewhere beneath the cloud, steel and concrete are about to come apart. Radar bombing changes everything, not because it is perfect, but because it is consistent. Before H-2X, cloud cover was an enemy equal to flak or fighters. Targets were missed entirely. Effort was wasted. Crews returned frustrated, knowing they had risked their lives for nothing. Now something always happens. Rail hubs are hit roughly. Urban centers are damaged repeatedly. Industrial zones are degraded even when visual aiming is impossible. The Americans begin to understand a crucial truth. Accuracy is not only about precision, it is about repetition. A single Norden-guided strike on a clear day might be devastating, but 10 radar-guided strikes in bad weather can be just as crippling. The doctrine evolves again. Clear skies, lead bombardier uses the Norden. Overcast, radar takes over. Heavy defenses, Pathfinder aircraft mark the target. Night, British techniques inform American adaptations. The war in the air becomes layered. Optics, electronics, experience, protection, all feeding into one system. Carl Norden's bombsight is still there, still revered, still guarded like a crown jewel. But it is no longer alone. By mid-1944, Callahan notices another change, one that does not appear in manuals. Bombardiers are calmer, not fearless, but steadier. They trust their instruments. They trust their formation. They trust that if they miss today, they will be back tomorrow, and the next day, and the next. Survival has created confidence. Confidence sharpens skill. The data confirms it. Circular error, probable, continues to shrink. Not dramatically, not magically, but steadily. Crew rotations stabilize. Veteran bombardiers mentor replacements. Lead crews are selected not just for rank, but for demonstrated consistency. Accuracy becomes institutional knowledge. The Norden was once sold as a shortcut to precision. The war proves there are no shortcuts. In Germany, the effect is cumulative and suffocating. Factories are not destroyed in a single night. They are damaged, repaired, damaged again. Rail lines are hit, restored, hit elsewhere. Workers are exhausted. Production schedules slip. Spare parts vanish into chaos. German commanders notice something unsettling. The Americans do not stop bombing when conditions are poor. They adjust. That means there is no rest, no weather window to recover, no pause long enough to regain balance. From the German perspective, the bombs seem less accurate than promised, but more relentless than imagined. And relentlessness, paired with adequacy, proves more dangerous than perfection. Callahan flies his 20th mission in June 1944. This time, the target is a rail junction feeding the Western Front. The clouds break briefly on the bomb run, and the Norden comes alive again. Gyros humming, crosshairs steady. The bombs fall clean. Later, reconnaissance photographs show tracks twisted, yards cratered, locomotives smashed where they stood. Callahan studies the images quietly. He remembers the early briefings, the talk of pickle barrels and surgical strikes. He remembers believing that accuracy was something you either had or didn't. Now he knows better. Accuracy is built by escorts that arrive on time, by radar that sees through cloud, by crews who live long enough to improve, by engineers who accept imperfection and design around it. Carl Norden built a brilliant instrument, but the war made it effective. And as 1944 turns toward its violent climax, American bombing is no longer defined by whether it can hit. It is defined by the certainty that it will. Again, and again, and again. September 11th, 1944. Over the Ruhr Valley. The smoke never clears anymore. Major Thomas Hensley peers down from the lead B-17 as layers of haze, cloud, and industrial soot merge into a single grey mass beneath the formation. Somewhere below, Europe's most important industrial basin is working itself to exhaustion. Steel mills, coking plants, rail yards, all still functioning, but never breathing freely. Hensley is not thinking about single targets today. He is thinking about patterns. "Same aiming offset as last week," he says into the interphone. The navigator nods. The bombardier adjusts the Norden, not to a factory roof, but to a familiar geometry. River bend, rail convergence, dense industrial sprawl. They have bombed this sector so many times it exists in their minds as a map of probabilities rather than places. This is not romantic precision. This is learned accuracy. When the bombs fall, no one expects a knockout blow. They expect disruption. Craters where tracks were repaired yesterday. Power lines restrung last month. Warehouses rebuilt since spring. And that expectation is met. By late 1944, American bombing accuracy has become something the pre-war theorists never predicted. Predictable. Not perfect. Not surgical. But reliable enough to plan entire campaigns around. The Norden bombsight did not deliver the myth it was sold with, that one aircraft could end a war by dropping one perfect stick of bombs. What it did deliver was a starting point. From there, the system filled in the gaps. When fighters arrived to stay, P-51 Mustangs escorting bombers all the way to Berlin. Bombers no longer scattered under attack. They flew tighter formations. Bombardiers held steady longer. Bomb runs were less rushed, less panicked. Accuracy improved not because the bombsight changed, but because the sky did. When radar bombing matured, missions stopped being conditional. Weather no longer cancelled war. It merely altered the method. And when crews survived long enough to fly 15, 20, 30 missions, they stopped being students. They became craftsmen. In the debriefing rooms, maps are no longer marked with hopeful circles. They are marked with trends. Repeated strikes on rail choke points reduce traffic volume week by week. Synthetic fuel plants show declining output, even when not completely destroyed. Aircraft factories assemble airframes that sit idle for lack of engines, bearings, or fuel. The bombing campaign begins to resemble accounting. Inputs applied, outputs measured, adjustments made. German officers sense the shift with growing dread. They are no longer reacting to brilliance or surprise. They are being worn down by competence, methodical, unspectacular, inescapable. A Luftwaffe intelligence summary in October 1944 notes bitterly. Enemy bombing effectiveness increases even when accuracy appears unchanged. That paradox captures the truth. The bombs do not need to be perfect. They need to keep coming. Hensley completes his tour in November. On his last mission, he watches a new bombardier take the Norden, hands steady but cautious. The young man makes minor corrections, small, disciplined movements learned from men who learned them the hard way. The bombs fall slightly long. Not a failure, just data. Next time, the correction will be smaller. Hensley knows something now that he did not know when he first flew. Precision is not a weapon. It is a process. Carl Norden gave the U.S. Army Air Forces a promise that technology could substitute for mass destruction. The war answered differently. Technology mattered, but only when embedded in a system that could survive error, learn from loss, and return tomorrow. The bombs became more accurate, not because one engineer solved the problem, but because thousands of airmen, mechanics, analysts, radar operators, and fighter pilots turned accuracy into habit. By the end of 1944, Germany is still standing, but it is staggering, and the bombs, falling through cloud and fire alike, no longer ask permission from the weather, the enemy, or chance. They arrive, they repeat, they improve, and that, more than any miracle device, is how American bombs finally learned to hit.